Hello, my name is Shaddai Tembo, your host for this week's TTS Talking Early Years podcast. I'm a lecturer in early childhood studies at Bath Spa University and an associate lecturer at the Open University. I am a trustee for the Fatherhood Institute and an independent writer and speaker for critical early years. Now, throughout this series, we'll be exploring representation in the early years, inspiring you with guidance on ways to be more inclusive in your practice. And I am delighted to welcome to the host of the podcast today, Joss Cambridge-Simmons, as today's guest. So, following on from our previous discussion, I thought it would be interesting to talk about representation in the early years. Why is this so important, and what impact does this have not only on children's learning, but for those working in the sector? I'll just start by sharing a bit about my experience, Joss, as a Black man working in the early years. And as we've discussed in the previous episode, it can be so joyful and so empowering to have that profession. But there are also a number of challenges. And certainly for me, I felt at times that I was the only Black man in the early years. I felt that I was often siloed and didn't really have that support. So for me, seeing other Black male role models work in the early years is really, really important. I just wanted to offer you some space to share your experiences of representation working as a male nanny.
Wow. It's taught me a lot about representation that I always knew, but I grew to understand how important it was. For example, I'm an 80s baby. There was only a handful of Black men on TV that were well represented. Lenny Henry, Ian Wright, Ainsley, Linford Christie, Mr. Motivator. That's who I grew up on. So then moving forward in life, stepping into early years, I'm now, in my eyes, the only Black man that's here. In most workplaces I stepped into as nurseries, I was the only Black guy. In most households I've worked in, I'm probably the only Black person they've probably ever employed, or the only Black male they've had in their house in this circumference, which to them isn't an issue, but I think I've had conversations with families I've worked with and they have not questioned it, but they've realised, wait, we've got no Black friends other than Joss. So which showed you representation matters, because I'm not, as much as I'm the first point of blackness for some of my families I work with, I'm not what blackness is overall. I'm black for me, if that makes sense. So now these families might think everyone's like Joss, when no, we're all different variations of Black men, where the representation in earlier supports that by having different individuals of men and Black men especially that have different approaches to supporting children. People tend to probably expect us to be strict and have a loud voice and shout and, or have a presence of us where children listen. Some of these children don't listen to me. and I prefer that sometimes, because I don't want a child to listen to me because they're intimidated or they're scared. I want a child to listen to me because they trust and we have a healthy relationship and a healthy bond, etc. Where I've then moved forward and more about representation within early years, as people were shocked to come to see you when you turn up for an interview, because my name is Joss Cambridge-Simmons. They're like, oh, you're Joss? Yeah, I'm Joss. I have to say that. And I said, I have to ask, who was you expecting? Oh, nothing. Are you sure? Because the energy says different. And I got to a stage where I was just saying that out loud, because I'm not sitting in the space of people working wise and not being able to be Black and be seen as a Black man. And then the misrepresentation of men in early years as well is an issue where there's misrepresentation because there isn't any of us. There's not enough. So everyone would have one Jerome working a setting, and everyone that's going to come in as a Black guy works like Jerome, wears a tracksuit and loves kicking ball with the kids. But no, I prefer to paint and do work around children's emotions, to do hide and seek and, have more of a relaxed atmosphere in the classroom that I might be in. So that's what I've come to terms with representation-wise within early years over the years.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that insight, Joss. And let's focus more specifically on children and their experiences.
Yes.
what's the importance for children of having that diversity of role models for them to look up to in the early years?
The importance, for example, of how important it is that you have your children exposed to every kind of culture and every kind of human that's, that isn't just you. Quick story. I work with a family right now. Little girl I look after is 6 in a few weeks. When we first met, she, in her eyes, didn't like me. We've worked out why. We've gone over it. And it was because everyone that looks like me is angry. This is her words. Because she goes to a private school, and sadly, there's like 4 black kids in the private school, because I've counted the parents in the school run. So the one little black boy in the school that she came across and had an altercation with wasn't nice to her, and she's now assumed every black guy or every black man isn't nice and shouts a lot. And she also then never had conversations or resources or materials that represented other cultures other than herself. So that's why representation for children matters, because I was able to be okay with all of that because she's a child. But the parents felt super uncomfortable. We've now had to have conversations about race and equality, and I've had to give them resources. Then I've had to question myself and be like, they have to be doing the work now for their own sake. So that's why representation matters for children. For example, I wear pink a lot, and I wear pink to make a statement now. And my little girl I look after said, you have to wear pink when you're with me, because the world has to see men can wear pink and men can be who they want to be. Because we have conversations when we meet our friends and we have play dates, she introduces me. She corrects people on my name. She tells people it's Joss, not Josh. That's why representation is important as well, because she understands the power in a name in regards, and she also has realised that a lot of people that don't look like her have names that she hasn't heard about. So we've then been on play dates. I've told the children who I am. I'm having a nanny, and they've gone up in arms saying, "You can't be a nanny. You're a man. You're a man." A little girl got upset. Shad. She started crying. She got really triggered. And then my little one started crying and was arguing with everybody, saying, men can be nannies, men can look after children, men are nice. I'm not going to cry, because it's really deep stuff, actually. And that's why representation matters so much, because our little children have their own worlds in these school playgrounds, have their own social hierarchies. So we want to know that they're navigating it in a way where it's not right, but it's being navigated in a way where we can support it at some point, where those interactions that happen with my children's friends happen and are well addressed, because the dad of the little girl that said I shouldn't be a manny took her home because he felt shame. He felt shy. He got really upset when I wasn't upset over it. This is normal. I was in podcast mode. I was about to have a whole podcast with the little girl, have a big conversation, because she was raring to go. So that's why representation for children matters, because they see more than we think. And they assume children are very literal individuals. So if they see a white person constantly kicking glass, they're going to think white people just kick glass. So we need to show them white people and black people and everyone from every walk of life and every variation, so they understand everyone does the same thing and everyone does things differently.
Yeah, that's a really powerful. Yeah. It's a really powerful story you just shared there, Joss. Thank you for that. And I guess it really speaks to the ways in which children are learning about these stereotypes and different forms of prejudice from such an early age. And it feeds into those broader conversations that we've been having in recent years about the need to discuss equality and inclusion, and specifically anti-racism in the early years. Yeah. That was great that in your experience, you've been able to challenge parents and have those conversations with children. But I agree. I suspect that you're the exception to the rule, aren't you? And for many settings, many parents and carers, they won't be having those conversations at all, will they?
No. Until I bring it up, like with the comment the little girl made of how she felt about how I look. I spoke to the school. I spoke to her teacher. The teacher got defensive. Oh yeah, we talk about race, and that's the issue, because it's not a conversation. It's like a lifestyle. It's an everyday practice. It's not just have one black book. It's literally, you have the reasons of why you have this black book, why you want to get more black stories in your classroom and stories for individuals from all backgrounds. On the school gate, I just didn't see that. I'm the only black guy here 5 days a week. I don't look different every day. I look the same. But he didn't see me. He didn't want to look towards me because he didn't know who I was. It happens all the time. So that's why anti-racism needs to kind of be approached in a more view of, okay, what's my own personal prejudice as an adult that my children might pick up? Even as an educator as well, because these children will go through life thinking it's one way when it's 10,000 different ways. And we're going to be the ones to blame, sadly, if we don't kind of fix up, as we say, and, do the work and question ourselves and grow.
Yeah, that's really important. I just want to focus more specifically on white educators then, for white educators who perhaps haven't spoken about or understood the nature of race and how that shapes society as a whole. For those people listening to this podcast today and thinking, what do I need to do next? I've listened to Joss and he's shared some brilliant insights, but I can't just invite Joss into my nursery setting. What about those settings that are in predominantly white areas where it's perhaps more difficult to engage in these sorts of conversations around race and difference with young children? What can they do specifically?
Just question their own personal outlook on life when it comes to other cultures. Because this is why I'm so big on educators doing self-work, going therapy, practicing something that takes you from A to B, heals your traumas. Because, for example, for white educators, they might have said traumas that derive from being brought up a certain way and only having white neighbours. So not really knowing how to interact with black people or Turkish people. When there's no way to interact with us, you just talk to us, we're human. But because of your own personal upbringing, I've also really realised your personal upbringing and your traumas can reflect in your practice as an educator. This is why we have to really be big on doing the work and healing. And how that looks for white educators is what they can do is more self-work, looking at themselves, questioning their own mentality towards why they don't like spicy food. Is it because it's spicy or is there a deeper rooted reason? And for example, understanding that, okay, the children in your setting that might be black might have a certain type of hair. Don't question it, please. If you want to know more, go on Google, do some research, do some homework, and find out how to talk about this in a way where you're not going to be seen as someone that's not comfortable with it and not be seen as someone that's trying to be too cool. And then, lastly is, there's books galore, there's Instagram pages, but I've realised they kind of give me the vibes of, yeah, I've got a black friend, I get it. No, it takes more than having one black friend to be able to understand what blackness is. And being an ally. So there's so many other ways you can aid the conversation of anti-racism and eradicate it and become an ally without even sometimes spending money, more questioning yourself, more even maybe trying new foods in your household. Go into Dalston Market and go into the auntie that's selling pounded yams and bammy and bananas, not just go into the one you usually go to, which might be Whole Foods, just for example. So yeah, that's how.
Yeah, thank you for that, Joss. I think what you say about doing the work for me feels really, really important for educators. And it's not these kind of major grand scale changes necessarily all the time, but those kind of small micro moments where you can make that little bit of change that are just as important when we're talking about the need to promote better representation in the early years. So that's a brilliant place to end this podcast today. Thank you, Joss.
It's all right.
I would like to say a huge thank you to our guest, Joss, for joining us and providing such valuable insights. You've been listening to the TTS Talking Early Years podcast with me, Shaddai Tembo, and Joss Cambridge-Simmons. If you've been inspired by our conversation today, don't forget you can sign up via the link in our episode notes and be the first to hear about future episodes.